Hey guys, this is editor Aaliyah jumping in. Here's a quick little update on the podcast for you guys. I have not been active in a while, and I recorded this episode a really long time ago. So maybe some of my opinions have changed since then. But with that being said, I really do think this podcast is a really, really great episode for teen girls or anybody struggling mentally, especially with eating disorders. And also, now that I'm editing this, I did not feel like going through and rewatching the whole episode and editing it bit by bit like I probably should do. So if I mess up words and say, hey, I'm gonna just edit that out later, just ignore that because I'm not doing that. And also, I need you guys who are watching this, my loyal followers. Meet the Truth podcast has suddenly became a very popular name for a podcast. And one of my good friends, Jonathan Johannesson, has a podcast also named Meet the Truth podcast. And I did not know this. And not that he said anything to me. And Jonathan, if you're watching this, I'm really sorry. I changed the name to my podcast and I did not even realize yours had the same name. So I know this is the second time I've changed the name, but I'm considering changing it again, especially because Lauren Johnson, I think it's Life with Lauren Johnson. Her podcast is also named Meet the Truth podcast, and then Carnivore RX's podcast is also named Meet the Truth podcast. So I'm thinking of changing the name again, and especially since I'm about to get back into doing podcast episodes again, I really need your guys' opinion. Should I change the name? Should I just keep it? Should I get it copyrighted? What should I do? I mean, I don't want to get it copyrighted and then like come under fire for like coining the name. But I do feel a sense of entitlement to it. Other than Jonathan, I think Jonathan picked it before I did, but everybody else that I can find did it after I did it and after Jonathan did it. So if you guys would just let me know, that'd be great. And sorry, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Also, make sure to get some Plex seasoning. I think you get 15% off using code. Go to eatplug.com and use code Aaliyah English, all caps, for 15% off.
Hey guys, welcome to Meet the Truth podcast. Today we have Michelle Hurn. She's a registered dietitian. She's been doing like low carb keto for a while now, I believe, and she used to struggle with eating disorders. So I really feel like this topic is something that you guys should listen into, especially if you're my key audience, which would be teenage girls. So Michelle, why don't you give us like a short introduction to who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So, my health journey actually began when I was 12 years old. When I was 12, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. I was 5 feet tall and 57 and a half pounds. So really sick. I ended up going to inpatient treatment and I was there for 2 months. I was put on the standard American diet, which, and fed a 24-hour tube feeding system. And the ingredients in tube feeding back then were corn syrup, soy protein, canola oil, really highly inflammatory ingredients. And unfortunately, fast forward 30 years later, they're the same. I was told even as a very young person that people don't really recover from eating disorders. Like if you struggle with binge eating disorder or bulimia or anorexia, you can become weight restored, but this is always going to be something you deal with. And, as a young person, that was pretty terrifying. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm always going to have, racing thoughts around food. I'm always going to be struggling with my self-image. And unfortunately, they weren't necessarily wrong. Like I did throughout my early adolescence and into adulthood, I did become weight restored, but I struggled with anxiety, with depression. I was constantly questioning like what I was eating, like, oh, is this enough? Is this too much? I feel like I was kind of standing on the sidelines of my own life. Like it seemed like other people, my friends, people could participate. They didn't seem to be overly worried about what they're eating, but I was always thinking about it, questioning it. I wanted to become a dietitian because I had this intuition that nutrition was powerful. I thought maybe there is something I can do with nutrition that will help my mental health. I've never been obese. My mental health issues run in my family. My mom has bipolar disorder. Obviously, I had anorexia. And unfortunately, as I went through the dietetic internship, so to become a dietitian, you get your 4-year degree, then you go through the internship, then you sit for the RD exam. there were a lot of things that I was taught that didn't necessarily make sense. For example, we would go in the room with someone with type 2 diabetes, which is a disease where your blood sugar is elevated. You have carbohydrate intolerance. You can no longer tolerate any glucose. Your cells are saturated. And my preceptor would say, okay, we're going to teach this patient to eat carbohydrates consistently throughout the day and then dose themselves with insulin consistently throughout the day. And I would just ask questions. I was a student. I would say, well, shouldn't we teach them to eat less carbohydrates if their blood sugar is high and carbohydrates make their blood sugar go high? And I was kind of pegged as this difficult dietetic student. No, that's not what we do. Carbohydrates are the foundation of nutrition. And I remember going into the room with someone who had been in a pretty bad car accident, and they were being fed, nasogastric tube feeding, kind of like I did when I was 12. And I flipped over the ingredients. I'm like, oh my God, it's the exact same ingredients. It's maltodextrin, it's soy protein. And then as I stated, I was 24 then. I'm 42 now. We have the same tube feeding ingredients. And then once again, I would just ask questions. I would say, is this the best way to refeed somebody who can't eat, whether they've been in a traumatic car accident or have a major cancer? And I was told, look, it's all about calories and protein. Quality is irrelevant. And so, as I became a dietitian and I worked in acute care, we just saw this revolving door of sickness. People would come in with prediabetes and full-blown diabetes and infections and amputations and heart disease. And we were told, it's not the guidelines that are the problem. It's patients aren't following them. And of course, there's exceptions, but for the most part, my patients seem to really be trying to eat a lot of whole grains and eat lean protein and restrict fat. But it wasn't really until 2019 that, I had my own health struggles. I was trying to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. I'm also an athlete. And I just felt like my health fell off a cliff. All of a sudden, I went from being able to run very well to I can run a few miles. My anxiety went from, mile to through the roof. And I basically decided, look, what I'm doing is not working. I'm eating this super high carbohydrate diet. I'm eating low fat proteins. I'm restricting fat. I'm doing everything that I was told as an athlete, certainly you should be doing. And my health was a complete mess. And so I decided I would adopt, went from initially a ketogenic diet, and I did a whole carnivore diet for over a month. And I was just blown away how my health transformed. And, I went, like I said, from paralyzing anxiety to I felt very calm. I could go for hours without eating. My muscle pain started to diminish. And that's when I really dove into the research. I would why am I feeling so much better? Why is my anxiety so much better? Because I was told this was going to be something I would deal with for the rest of my life. And I was also told if I eliminated carbohydrates, I was going to not have energy and feel terrible, and eating a bunch of fat, heart rate explode, all these myths we have around nutrition. And so, I went from, as many people do, you have a health issue and then you start doing some research. And at that time in 2018, we had multiple clinical trials on type 2 diabetics and low carb diets. And I was like, why has no one taught me this? Why aren't we teaching this to our patients? And so I very, as a 20-something-year-old, very naively was like, oh, I'll just bring this to my clinical director and we'll start teaching this in hospitals and we'll start helping people heal. And I was like, oh no, it's not what we do. And then fast forward to today, we still can't teach that in most hospital systems because we have to follow the standard of care, which is the guidelines. And so it's hard because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so I left the hospital setting and, wrote a book and it's just become my advocacy. I've seen a lot of transformation with low carbohydrate nutrition, and it's nuanced depending on, where people are at. Certainly there's a very different dietary prescription for my type 2 diabetics who are very obese and have a very high A1C versus someone who's maybe potentially very underweight. But I have found that by following what I would call the foundation of human nutrition, which is very high in fat, very high in animal-based proteins, and then using carbohydrates in relation to your goals and metabolic health is really changed my life, has changed my practice. And, I would hope would be the way forward for human nutrition.
That's so powerful too. Food is such a good tool for sick people, and then it ends up making them worse, especially the way modern medicine tends to use it. It's so disheartening. I really want to talk about your relationship with eating disorders because I feel for my audience especially, it's really important. As somebody who used to struggle with not necessarily definitely disordered eating patterns, but just like mentally like eating disorders. It was really difficult. So when do you think your relationship with like food started to kind of go down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I was very young. I would say probably 11 years old, and my mom has bipolar disorder. She also struggled. I don't think she was ever diagnosed with anorexia, but certainly had those tendencies. Lots of weighing yourself, lots of potentially restricting your food, saying, "Oh, I'm so fat, I'm so fat." All these messages we potentially get as very young people, like fat is bad, fat is unlovable, fat is not good. And so I, as a young person, just got the message that like, being leaner is better. And at that time, I was participating in soccer, and I remember, I just kind of started just losing a very little bit of weight, nothing major. And a coach said something like, "Wow, you're looking lean and mean," and it was just this feedback. And I don't believe that anybody ever sets out to really harm themselves. It's not like I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to starve myself." It becomes this cycle, right? And we don't really know, like, we do know some people are potentially more genetically predisposed to have like anorexia, bulimia. There's definitely a nature and a nurture. There's definitely something potentially psychological, genetic. Obviously, like I said, mom had a mental health disorder. It's not, I'm certainly more likely to have one. But then, I've got 3 older sisters, and none of them have those issues. So yeah, so I was very young when that happened, and then the family system reinforced that, and then the nutrition that I was fed, and once again, I don't think any doctor or hospital system has bad intentions. I just think they're following the guidelines, which is really bad advice. If anybody's listening to this and if they've been in inpatient treatment, it's a total mess. Like, first of all, it's not standardized. You can go to inpatient treatment in California and get totally different treatment in Texas or Utah. They're all different. And the latest statistics we have on anorexia specifically are really bad, meaning, 20% of people with anorexia will die. 20% of those people will take their own life. I mean, it's a horrible disease. And just for someone who's been there, if you end up reading my book, like I used to like pray to die. Like I would wake up in the morning and just be depressed that I was still alive. And now as many years later, just, oh, thank God. Like I'm so grateful. I've got a beautiful life, and I'm married. I'm very, very happy human. But when you're like in that horribleness, like your body is eating itself, you're literally starving. Your mind is telling you you're overweight. Like you just don't see a way out. And so my advocacy has been, our current treatment is not working. We have no drugs approved for anorexia specifically, but I was put on 7 medications, for depression, for anxiety, for GI issues. And then we throw a ton of sugar and flour at an already inflamed body and brain. And, my research, and I would say the research of like Dr. Chris Palmer, Dr. Sati Shivani, has shown that if we can just simply stabilize blood glucose, get people's blood glucose stable, then that has a powerful impact on your brain. And what does that mean? The current guidelines, the way they are, like let's say you go into treatment, you're going to be fed like pancakes, like a very high carbohydrate diet, high carbohydrate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Your blood sugar is going to go up and down all day. That is very stressful just from a psychological standpoint. I feel euphoric. I feel depressed. I feel euphoric. I feel depressed. It's very stressful from a physiological standpoint. You're going to get all kinds of, cortisol, glucagon, blah. And we do have some research that people with eating disorders, similar to mental health disorders, their brain just may not metabolize glucose as well as people without these disorders. Why? We don't know. But if you think about it, like the disease epilepsy. So epilepsy is a seizure disorder. Babies are born with epilepsy. They didn't do anything wrong. They just have a genetic abnormality in their brain where they don't metabolize glucose very well. And so you feed babies this very, high fat, low carb diet, like a ketogenic diet. By the way, breast milk is ketogenic. And they stop seizing. And so what we've seen is people with like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and now we're exploring, anorexia and bulimia. When we feed people this very high fat, low carbohydrate diet, we are now fueling the brain with a different substrate, with ketones and free fatty acids, which is glucose. And for a lot of people, the brain functions better. And so for me and for, a lot of people in this space that are advocating, we're just saying like, hey, what we're doing isn't working. We think it makes sense to explore an alternative approach.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right. So I'm kind of gonna say something that might like get on a lot of people's nerves, especially if they've struggled with eating disorders. And I 100% promise that these people who said this thing did not come from a place of malice, or any kind of bad intentions. But growing up, I had a friend, and her mom, when she was in her teen years, she was very Christian, like growing up, and she said this was before like anorexia like was really taken like super seriously too. She said that she used to pray to God that she would get anorexia so that she could be skinny. And
Mm.
like that's, I mean, it's sad, but it's also like, are you serious? Right? Like you think about these people who say stuff like that, and like you really don't want that. Why do you want that? And then my friend, whose mom had that habit of wanting to, I guess, she was on the opposite side of an eating disorder spectrum where she was like binging constantly. So
Sure.
she wanted to have that control to be able to restrict. And her daughter ended up having that same like mental cycle, right? And
Mm.
then me, and I really don't talk about this on my channel because for me, I don't feel it's important to my story as maybe other components, but I used to struggle a lot with like eating and like binging and then like, you know, going to the bathroom and turning on the shower and like, you
Mm.
know, what goes from there. And I never had anybody ever discover that I was doing this. And so when I went carnivore, it just all stopped. Like I really don't know when the switch happened, but it was like suddenly like these things were like irrelevant to me. Like I never, it's been years since I thought about those kind of habits. Well, not your years. Over a year. And, you know, it's amazing to me because, you know, now I don't really think about that part of my life. I don't think about those cycles that I used to go through. And I think maybe now is an important time to talk about it because we're almost seeing the opposite in people where it's good to be fat and fat positivity. And I'm like, well, that's still disordered eating, right? We shouldn't be eating so much food. So, I got a little bit off topic, but like, how does it make you feel for somebody to wish they had this condition?
Oof. It's interesting. Nobody's ever asked me that, but I would say that, you know, I would have a lot of compassion for that person because they clearly don't understand the depths of, you know, an eating disorder because they're, I mean, once again, highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. More people will die of anorexia than schizophrenia, than major depression. You know, I lost a friend to bulimia who died, had a heart attack at 15. So it's, I hear you saying like, I want to lose weight, but trust me, like that is not something that you want. You definitely don't want a psychiatric disorder. Yeah, I think that's just probably an uneducated view. I would encourage anybody, and sometimes, you know, if you're ever thinking a certain way, I always encourage, especially young people, like go spend some time, go volunteer, see if you can at a hospital that or an eating disorder center that will change your mind. I promise you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like honestly, that's not the first person I've heard like say they wish they had an eating disorder because now like our food is so inflammatory. Like, okay, I'm not promoting fasting, but a lot of these girls with eating disorders, they binge and then they fast, you know, or guys, they fast for like extended periods of time. And that, you know, it gives a lot of people euphoria. It helps with autophagy and all this kind of stuff. So almost in a way, like just the way my brain thinks about it, they're getting all these inflammatory responses from food, and their body knows that it's not good for them. So the next option for them is just to not eat.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's actually really insightful. And I think there's something to be said about that. You know, I think for a lot of people with eating disorders, I remember when I was in recovery, I even telling like a dietitian, I was like, I will eat whatever you tell me to. Like, I just don't want to feel so awful because it was like I was once again being fed the standard American diet, this very quote unquote healthy, whole grain, very high in carbohydrates. And, you know, like you pointed out, a lot of those foods and a lot of the foods we feed people are super inflammatory. humans didn't evolve to eat cereals and Pop-Tarts and crackers. Even for some people, like the starches can be very inflammatory. So yeah, I mean, I hear that point that, so once again, my solution, especially people with eating disorders have to be very careful about fasting, is how can we set ourselves up to where we're eating in a way that, like you said, is sustainable. And I think, starting with a carnivore diet is excellent because, meat and fat, one, are incredibly blood sugar stabilizing. You're going to be fueling with both, ketones and free fatty acids. And then from there, it's kind of the ultimate elimination diet. Often people that I've worked with will do that for a set period of time and then be like, okay, I want to start adding a few things back in. And often they can. Often people can tolerate some fruits and things, and they're totally fine. But their foundation of their diet is very different than the standard American diet foundation. They're not eating, tons of bread and tons of pasta and all these processed food, these cookies, crackers, sodas. They're really focusing more on saturated fat and animal fat and all these things we've been told are really bad for us. But when they do that, I mean, once again, as you experience, your health improves, your mental health improves. And as far as I really hope this is one thing that I appreciate in my recovery is I never want to be skinny again. That's a horrible life. Once at 5 feet tall, 57 pounds, that's dying skinny. But even when I was in recovery, I relapsed. But now, I want to be strong. I could not do the running that I do. I could not, just do the living that I do if I didn't have muscle mass, if I wasn't, a normal weight, if I didn't lift weights, if I didn't, fuel my body. So that's always my message too. Dr. Gabriel Lyons talks about how muscle is the organ of longevity. So, we had, as you pointed out, the pendulum, and you're too young to remember, but it used to be super duper skinny was in, and then we had the body positivity where it was cool to be fat. So it's also not cool. You can't be healthy at every size. You can't be healthy, massively obese when your A1C is 14. You can't be healthy at 5 feet tall and 57 pounds, right? That's a lie. But, as opposed to being super underweight, I think everybody can have a healthy body where they are strong.
Yeah, I'd rather people be 10, 20 pounds overweight than be 10, 20 pounds underweight.
I would too.
It's much better for your hormones, especially that. And a lot of the reason why I think, people relapse so much, especially for eating disorders, is because what are you told? You're told to, eat whatever you want. You can eat any food, just eat, right? You need to start eating wheat bran and cereals, and then you can introduce McDonald's or all these fear foods that people have, and they want you to reintroduce them. And then you look at people who are going through recovery, and their fear foods are almost valid. They're scared of pastries. Well, I mean, you got gluten and sugar, and that's just a disaster for your blood sugar. And then I have seen a lot of people who were scared of meat, which I think that doesn't necessarily come from, internally. I think it comes from the propaganda around meat, how bad it is for you, etc. And, I just feel so bad. And I really have these people in my heart who want to get better and they want to find a way out, but everything they're being told is the complete opposite of what they should do.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. And I think if we could, well, first of all, let's back up. I think what you said is really valid about we're told just eat all things in moderation. I've had someone tell me their dietitian told them, you will know when you are well, when you can eat all foods in moderation. And this was somebody with severe bulimia. And she was like, I would, take a tiny bite of a candy bar, and then I just go off the rails. I would binge. Some people are literally unable to eat those sugary foods. And then they feel shame, oh, why can't I do that? It's my fault, but we have to realize that we live in a society where these foods are highly addictive, highly processed from not only a physiological standpoint, like you pointed out, your blood sugar is going to spike and crash. So you're going to, even if you ate enough calories for the whole day, you're going to start craving more because your blood sugar's crashed. But also they do impact your brain. I mean, it is literally somebody's full-time job. We have food scientists that work for Kellogg's and General Mills and Doritos that are working to find that exact point when you eat these things that you won't stop eating them. It kind of overrides your brain. That's horrible because most people watching this, it is very rare if you ate a steak, that it was a pound, big steak. you would finish that and be like, man, I need another pound steak. You'd be like, oh, good, I'm good. But I'm sure you have, we've all eaten like cookies and crack, like we've eaten a lot of that stuff because it does not have that same feedback mechanism in your brain. So when we have these dietitians and these quote unquote health professionals saying we need to eat all things in moderation, it really ignores that some of these things are not meant for the human body. Some of these things are not actually food. And if you've tried to quote unquote eat these things in moderation before and it hasn't worked, maybe it's not your fault. Maybe it's, like you said, not eating food. And yeah, as far as meat goes, the propaganda around meat is really is not science based. I mean, we literally evolved eating meat. When people ask me, is meat inflammatory? Is meat bad for you? I like to, before we even get into the science, just say like, if meat was bad for you, the human race would not exist. We literally evolved eating the megafauna. A lot of the produce throughout evolution was very small, minimal calories, minimal carbs. Animal meat and fat and organs were very calorie dense, nutrition dense. So, and we extract a lot of nutrition very easily from meat. What does that mean? That means that we can actually use all the protein and all the vitamins and minerals. Where if you eat a lot of these processed, soy things, like your body just doesn't use that nutrition very well.
Yeah, you're totally right. I kind of want to switch topics. I want to talk about your ultra marathon training. So
Okay.
You scare me. First of all, I'm going to say that you scare me. You intimidate me. I was watching, I don't know, a video, a clip, something, and you said, "Oh yeah, I've had a toenail fall off before." And I was like, "Oh,
I lost a few, yeah, and those ultras will get you."
And I was like, "You scare me." And I kind of come from the standpoint, and I'm not like saying that running is bad, but like from the research I've done and what I've seen, like running long distances raises your cortisol a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of science to back that up. So like, how do you kind of combat that with like what you do?
Yeah, and I would be remiss to say I would never, if somebody said like, "Hey Michelle, what is the best way to exercise? What is the best way for longevity? What is the best way for mental health?" I would never say, you should do, you should run an ultra. It is incredibly hard on your body. And it's also an incredible time commitment. But just like, it's something I'm passionate about. Before I did ultra, I was a marathon runner for many years. And, I had that health crash in 2019. And I thought I was going to completely give up running. Like, I'm never going to do this again. My body's shot. And I healed to the point on a lower carb diet that I started to dream again. I was like, maybe I could. My poor partner was like, "Oh, it'll be great. You'll be a recreational runner. What if I run ultras?" So so you asked about cortisol. So, I think for me, a lot of what I do outside of the running is obviously pretty pro-inflammatory, is very anti-inflammatory. When I was a marathon runner, I was sore all the time. Like I could not run 15, 20 miles without just being wrecked, and I was eating a lot of carbs all day throughout my runs. And so now I use carbohydrates much more strategically. I still follow a much higher protein, higher fat. I do use carbohydrates during very long runs or after those runs. Usually my evening meal, for the next day of running. But yeah, I make sure that I meditate, I get plenty of fluid, I do all those things. And for me, it's just, it's been a huge blessing to be healthy enough to be able to do that.
Yeah. And you're not concerned about eating carbohydrates because you're burning the glucose so quickly through running that you get back into ketosis pretty quickly, don't you?
I would imagine, I've never measured my ketones outside of like several years ago. Someone was just curious. And yeah, my coach is also a lower carbohydrate athlete. And he was in deep ketosis, even with 150 grams of carbs an hour. So you can certainly be in ketosis on a higher carb diet if you're exercising pretty intensely. And I'm also like, I'm one of those people, like, I'm okay, certainly if I flexed in and out of ketosis. I think it's extra important if you're, using it for like a specific health reason, but I don't necessarily think you have to be in ketosis all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think even like on strict carnivore, like most of the time I'm not really in ketosis. So I think blood ketones are not a very good like measurement. It's the better of the two. But I still think what your body is using is not getting measured. So who knows, right? Like, we never actually know. I'm looking through my list of questions. I had one in my brain, but it went away. Okay. Still can't figure it out.
That's all right.
So what are you eating now? Like, what's your daily meals look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do a lot of my running fasted. If I'm running less than about 90 minutes, so probably up to about 12 miles, I don't eat before, which, I'm sure you're going to read online is going to cause your cortisol to go through the roof or whatever. But once again, I'm cool. Like, if somebody else wants to do something that works for them, because the point, as a long distance athlete, I really do not want to get an insulin response before I run. Why is that? And a lot of people make this mistake. If you ever go watch like a marathon, even a half marathon, and I'm not, let's say there's 1,000 runners, and I'm not talking about the first 10 or the super elite people, but a lot of people are overweight. It's like, how in the world are you running a marathon and you're overweight? Like, it seems, because if it was just calories in, calories out, it's like, you're running 50 miles a week and you're overweight. This is wild. It used to be kind of wild to me before I really understood this. But what's happening often, and it's what I used to do, people are eating carbohydrates before they run. You get that insulin response before you run. You're shutting down your body's ability to burn fat. Insulin is a fat storage hormone, and it doesn't just kind of like titrate down, it like falls off a cliff. And so, for a lot of people, you're eating carbs before you run. Now you can't burn fat. You're eating carbs after you run. Now you're, you couldn't burn fat before, you're burning sugar. Now you're storing it. So those people, they never give their body an opportunity to tap into their own fat stores. And even if you're very lean, I'm a relatively lean human. You have theoretically enough body fat to run. I think it's like 4 or 5 marathons back to back. So of course you'd have muscle fatigue and other things. But anyway, so yeah, I usually have, I drink something called Unimate. It is a yerba mate concentrate. It's been shown to like increase ketones. It's a really cool thing. I'm really skeptical of supplements, but I love this drink. So I'll drink that before I run. And then as soon as I'm done running, I usually will have, and that's another nice thing about being very fat adapted, is I used to be like, oh my gosh, I have to get something within 10 minutes of running or I'm going to get dizzy and shaky. But I can actually like pat my dog, shower. And then I have pretty much 2 main meals. My post-run meal is a, high protein meal, whether it's salmon or ground beef, very different. When I was a high carb athlete, it was like this big bowl of oatmeal and fruit and whatever. But yeah, now it's about 8 ounces of some type of animal protein. You cook in tallow or right now we have some lard. And, I'll have some type of carbohydrate, usually like a rice, something kind of easy on my stomach. Then in the middle of the day, I'll just have like another protein. Usually it's like a leftover ground beef or ground beef and salmon tend to be the ones we do the most of. It's very boring. And in the evening, ground beef, pork, steaks. My wife makes homemade long fermented sourdough. I do a lot of butter. And then I usually do some type of side vegetable. We have a farmer's market. My wife's growing some green beans in the yard. So we'll do some carrots or green beans. But it's very simple. People sometimes freak out about like, I need variety. I need all this. It's like, do you really? Like, I don't know. For me, it's been really good and easy just to get into routines and rhythms. As far as supplements go, I do the yerba mate. I do a little bit of liver a couple times a week. I don't love it, but someone who runs a lot, I think it's a good thing to do. I do take a calcium magnesium supplement in the evening, and that's about all I do. Like, it's not overly excited. People are like, what's the secret? I'm like, it's just a shit ton of running and a good attitude. Just like anything else in life, it's really consistency, and that's one reason I really like running. So much in life, you get on Amazon and it's here in 24 hours, Google, and it's like, this is to be successful. It's every day. I show up, I execute, I eat, I don't make excuses, and that's what's, made me successful.
Yeah, that's so true. Consistency probably matters more than the exact formula, right?
100%.
If you're changing the formula every day, you're not going to get the same results as doing the same thing. And you're never going to know if it works because you're not giving anything enough time to really discover what's going on. I did want to talk about the Unicity products.
Oh, sure.
Because I've been asked to, oh God, how can I say this without sounding crazy? I was asked by somebody else if I wanted to kind of buy into the company and promote the product. And I haven't decided whether I want to do that or not. A, because I definitely don't have the money for that. And B, because I don't really know if I believe in them or not. Now, of course, I haven't tried them yet. And that would be something I did before I decided anything. But would you say they're really worth it, like price-wise and for what they do?
Yeah, and first of all, I want to validate that I was right there with you. I had a dietitian message me on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I really like your book, and I would love to talk to you about the American Diabetes Society." And and we set up a time to chat. And then she started telling me about the Unicity products. And I was like, "Oh man, you reeled me in by telling me you like my book, and now you're trying to sell me stuff. Like, dang, girl, like you." I literally came home and told my wife, like, this woman just wasted half an hour of my time. But I will say that when I told her I wasn't interested and I appreciated her time, she said, "Well, can I send you the science? Dr. Ben Bickman is on the science board." And I said, "Oh, no, don't. I know Dr. Bickman. He's on the American Diabetes Society with me." And so I called him and said, "Okay, Ben, like, be real with me. Like, you're about like a T for real." And he said, "No, that we've actually are seeing this naturally increases GLP-1. And he said, for you, Michelle, it's probably going to be most beneficial because it increases your liver's production of glutathione, which is a master antioxidant and actually helps suppress inflammation." And I'm like, "Oh." And he said, like, I'll send you some samples. And so he sent samples, and it was very interesting to see because, my wife was using it and she's like, "This is amazing. This is helping me intermittent fast." And I was using it, and all of a sudden my body was recovering better. And so I called Ben and I was like, because it does actually increase your ketones. I was like, "Is it because I'm more fat adapted?" He's like, "No, it has to be the glutathione." And so then I went down the rabbit hole. It felt like 2019 again. I'm like, now I got to do all this research. And I was very impressed. I was people I very much respect in the community. Nick Norwitz, who I've written a paper with, did a deep dive into it and was like, "Yeah, this is really amazing." Jason Fung, Taishul, a lot of these people were like, this is an actually very legitimate company. And so I took the time, actually, I met the CEO. And so, I got to actually talk with some of the people within the company. And for me, that's a big deal because you're so right to be skeptical because so many supplement, like you and I, we could start, Hurn English calcium company, and it literally legally doesn't have to have any calcium in it. Like that's how terrible most supplements are. But what I have seen, it's pretty rare that there's something out there that I can use for multiple patients. For example, someone trying to lose weight. Like I'm personally concerned about everyone and their mom getting on GLP-1s. Those were supposed to be short term. You're very sick, type 2 diabetic, and now it just seems so. These products actually can help people titrate off these medications. They increase your body's own endogenous GLP-1. They reduce inflammation. It's been really cool. It's been really cool to see it kind of in different aspects of my dietetic practice. And I'm just starting to see it a little bit more with athletes. I mean, my coach used it when he broke the 100-mile world record, because once again, you're getting that stable energy. I used it during my last ultra. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think, it's something that I had never seen before, and it's something that I think will hopefully, see more of, because it's, for a lot of people, it's another tool in their toolbox. You and I are pretty dialed in our low carbohydrate diet. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people are struggling. So for them to be able to, take something and be like, "Oh man, this is helping with my cravings, helping me really dial this in," like that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think for the price point, like if you go buy it through like you or somebody else who's selling it, it is a lot cheaper.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things too, where it's like, I want to say, it's like between like 175 and 250 a serving, which, wow, that seems expensive. But like I went to get an Americano the other day and it was like $4.70. I was like, what? Washing my car? Why is coffee $5? Like, so all things relative, right? And I think often in society, we trade dollars for dimes, meaning, I have no problem dropping, $700 on a cell phone or spending this much money, where it's like, $100 on a health coach, or, we won't spend to to learn more, for self-improvement, for health, we're very quick to be like, that's expensive. But then we'll, and I'm guilty about this sometimes, we'll drop so much money going out to dinner or on drinks or whatever. So I always encourage people, like, you've got to take the long-term health approach, And one thing I appreciated about the company too is, they offered a 90-day money-back guarantee. So it's like, if you tried it and you're like, this stinks, then you can always send it back. But yeah, I'm newer to the company. But yeah, it's been really cool to see, just like I said, with different populations of people.
Yeah. Me and the lady who asked me about it, she told me about like the buy-in thing. If you have like 10 people who like buy it, then it basically covers your buy-in or something like that. And I was like, oh, well, I'll see if I can find 10 people. And so far I haven't found, I think I found like one person. So
yeah,
it took me a while.
And you're so young, if you were able to, gosh, sometimes I wish when I was, 18, 20 years old, I had started with things like this, because, anything you can do in life too, to build some residual income, because I don't have to tell you, like, things are expensive, so I think it's always a good thing.
Yeah. And I've made some money off of my book, and like my book's probably not nearly as informative as your book, but even then, like, that's an extra like $30-$40 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, that's like my gas money for the month. So I'm good. Yeah, I do put so much time and effort into like sharing, my experience, and trying to help people, whether they want to do carnivore, whether they want to do low carb, whether they want to do animal-based, like, whole food diet. Like, I try and, like, really be honest and genuine and share so much of my time. And when I tell you guys that I've made not a single penny off of anything off of social media other than my book, I'm being 100% serious. So
yeah, this business is, we don't do this for the money. Like, it is not. I can make a lot more money just going back to the hospital setting. But like you said, like when your health is restored, it's like you can't. I feel like it's my gift of gratitude. Like, I will never be able to pay back. I could do this for the rest of my life, and it will never fully match the health that I've been given back. Like, and if anybody's listening to this and they're dealing with depression or anxiety, like, those are horrible diseases. And to be free from that, to feel joy, to feel like this is why we do this.
Yeah, and then like one of my reasons for being so skeptical about like products is because there are so many products out there that are just like a complete money scheme, right?
This is true.
There are people like us who get into this like social media, and that takes up so much of their time, and they're like, well, I don't make any money, right? I need to figure out something easy, fast that I can do to make money. And then these companies reach out to them and they're like, hey, if you promote our product and get people to buy it, we'll give you money. And then they're like, oh, this is the answer to everything. And essentially, I think some people don't really know that the product is like just a complete sham. But I think for a lot of people, they know, but they don't care.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that are just
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is like specific to like the low carb community. I'm just saying like in general, like social media, I guess, like that. And I'm so scared to get into like products and like promoting products, because I never want to be one of those people who just promote stuff to make money off of it. And if I were to genuinely promote a product, it would be because I enjoy it and I think it could help somebody. Other than that, I don't think other than like shirts and stuff I find on Amazon, like I'm not going to be a really big promoter for stuff. And I think that's what most people should do.
I agree. No, I mean, I think if anybody like asks, like, oh, you promote this, it's something that you use, you believe in, you would go to bat for. It can't just be like, oh yeah, they asked me to and I'm getting a kickback or whatever. So
yeah, everybody I've talked to who promotes Unicity, like their products, they actually use them themselves on like a daily basis. And I know some lady and she takes 2 Unimates a day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. So are you like a big promoter for like high fat carnivore diets for like healing for your clients, or are you just kind of like taking like that whole foods like lower carb approach?
Yeah, I would say I'm more of a whole foods approach, but it's nuanced, because if somebody is super underweight, you really have to you have to pull the lever. Are you going to be like a high carb, or you're going to be a, high fat? And for most of my, population is really wanting to do more of that low carb approach. And so I would certainly lean on fat. And another nice thing about eating more fat is it tends to be volume wise, not as much, right? Like if you're trying to eat 1,000 calories with carbs, you're going to have to eat so much rice and all this stuff, which, we can argue about the metabolic benefits of that, but that's just a lot to eat, where it's like, hey, when you're eating fat, like butter and those things are much more condensed. And like you said earlier, for hormonal support, I think high fat is really the way to go. And then, of course, on the flip side, if somebody is massively overweight, sometimes people can get a little excited with fat, where they're eating a lot of fat and they may not be losing fat. They may be like, oh, I feel pretty good. My blood sugar is more stable. But then sometimes we might pull back on the fat a little bit and then say like, okay, maybe we increase your protein. Maybe we add a little bit of vegetables or something you can tolerate. So
I will say for those people who struggle a lot with like overeating, fat is like a really great tool, because I could eat a lot of chicken thighs, or like just chicken that's like it has to taste nice, but like a lot of chicken or like a lot of beef, but I could not sit down and eat a whole stick of butter. And I will say I can probably eat 2,000 calories in steak, but I can't eat 800 in butter. Unless I like put it in my coffee or like something like that. Like I could definitely do it that way. But I do think for people who struggle so much with like overeating, or just that like really like full stomach like dopamine response that you get, I would say fat is like the easiest thing to just like turn to. Like you're like craving, fiending for something, like just go eat a bunch of butter, and like when you're sick of butter, like don't eat,
It is much harder to overeat on protein and fat, and like especially that combination, if you get, like you said, those foods that are like ground beef or steak that has some fat, or chicken wings, versus, any other processed food. Like, and that's what we've made such a big mistake. And it's a little bit of a tangent, but this whole calories in, calories out, like your body does not have calorie receptors. It has hormone receptors. Like, we'll just say arbitrarily, like 500 calories of steak has a very different impact on your body than 500 calories of rice or cereal, so. But yeah, no, I'm big on, certainly on protein, fat. That combo is what really makes you full, which stabilizes blood glucose, which is going to support muscle growth. So
Yeah. So for someone listening who's maybe struggling with disordered eating habits, anxiety, or they just feel stuck in the eat more variety kind of propaganda we have, what would be your advice that they could take away?
Yeah, I would say like it's still hard. My first intuition was like, get with somebody, get with like a low carb or ketogenic like health coach or dietitian. And that can still be more difficult to find, but there's a lot more of us than there used to be. It used to be just like a struggle, but now there's so many like health coaches that are even certified, even if they're not true dietitians, but they're certified in metabolic health or primal coaches, because if you're really in it with an eating disorder, you're going to need that accountability. It's very hard to do on your own. People can, but I think accountability can be huge. And having somebody just to kind of like, set up a basic guide for you, and to like be able to message and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm eating. Also, like we talked about earlier, time, consistency, patience. You are not going to get better if you do this for a day or a few days. Like you really need to commit. I always tell people like, you got to make recovery like non-negotiable. Like if I offered you $10,000 and said, eat off the plan, go work out too much, you would be like, no, my recovery is the most important thing. So if you get that mindset that I really want to recover, and get with somebody who knows, low carb nutrition, and then from there, execute.
Yeah, and I agree with that so much. And I'm almost a certified, I think the paper is going to say ancestral diet nutrition coach or health coach, something along those lines.
Okay.
Right now, my certification says John Doe on it, so I guess I'll have to wait for that to get changed. So I think Wednesday or sometime after that is when I'm officially certified, which I'm excited. And I will say I'm probably not going to be coaching for a little while, just because there's a lot that goes into coaching outside of just being certified.
Sure.
Yeah. So for people who want to read your book, what's it called? Where can you find it? What would what's your key audience for the book?
Yeah, my book is called The Dietitian's Dilemma. So the subtitle is what do you do when your health is restored by doing the opposite of everything you were taught. And I would say, I wanted to speak about several disease states that I felt like we had very good evidence for. And so the main chapters are type 2 diabetes, mental health disorders, including major depression and anxiety, eating disorders, which is still a bit controversial, but there's a lot of good evidence in there. And of course, antidotes, heart disease, because, there's this whole myth that eating meat causes heart disease. So I wanted to debunk that with science. And then sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting, which is a big issue, especially as people get older. Then there's a whole chapter on where the guidelines came from. Because I think most people kind of will probably like, oh, there has to be some science. It's bizarre. It's political. It's religion. It's all kinds of nonsense. And then there's a chapter just on running because people ask me about my running. So, I'm honored. Anyone that wants to check it out, it's on Amazon. I also wrote a kid's book called The Fox Family Food Fight. Little Freddie Fox gets type 2 foxabetes, and the foxatition at the hospital isn't particularly helpful. And so any proceeds of that, I have a charity where we donate regenerative beef to our local food pantry. So all the proceeds from that book go straight to that. So I'm honored. Those are my 2 books.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you donate the money. That makes me happy. More beef for America, right?
Yeah, and food pantries right now, it's maybe a final message or struggling. If you guys are just feeling a little overwhelmed with the world, what can I do? Are your local food pantry, if they will take fresh or frozen donations, it's a great thing to do. If you can donate meat, if a lot of them can't, canned chicken, canned tuna, our local pantries over the last 2 years have told me they're getting no protein anymore. Restaurants used to donate and stuff, but because of inflation, it's all carbs, or 90%. So, if you want to do something good in your community, that's a great thing to do, is just to give back.
Yeah, I agree. I'm quite glad that, especially where I live, there's a lot of churches that donate to food pantries. I'm not exactly sure what they donate, but I know, at least particularly in the Charlotte area, there's a lot of mega churches that do outreach events, which is giving back to the homeless, which is really great. But yeah, I would say 95% of the food is probably not ideal, but gotta do
rice and beans and the goal, obviously non-perishable stuff, but it's just, and I can only speak from what I'm witnessing in my local area, but it's just a lot less, because it's more expensive. Protein tends to be, so a lot less of that. So anything we can do to kind of help our community with a little bit more protein, I think is helpful.
Yeah, and then a lot of it is soda. Why?
Jeez.
Did you get your...
Not for human consumption, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I remember one time I went to a homeless shelter to volunteer, and we were serving them food. I think it was soup, some kind of soup, and then we were pouring people Sundrops, which is it's local to the Carolinas, but it's a soda, and Sherwine is their partner company. So we were just pouring people sodas and here you go, and then you want a cookie, and I was
a lot of
is this really what we're feeding people?
I'm concerned. One of the patient populations I work with out in the Bronx is mostly Medicaid, and we're going to have cuts for food stamps and Medicaid coming, and so it's just ooh. Oh,
you work in the Bronx?
Virtually, yeah.
Oh, so. I was about to say, I recently saw something about a billionaire lady paying for a bunch of people's medical school down there because there weren't enough doctors, because people don't want to work down there because they don't get paid as much, and a bunch of stuff.
It's probably one of the toughest patient populations that I've worked with. It's hard. They're just lack of resources, but it's very rewarding. People are very grateful.
Yeah, that's super good. So, Michelle, for everybody watching this interview, how can they find you? If somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would you tell them to get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram at Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat. I have my website, thedietitiansdilemma.net. You can directly email me through there. There's a bunch of information on my books and other resources on there as well. I'm on X at Michelle Hurn RD as well.
So I just want to thank everybody for watching this video, and I want to thank Michelle specifically for agreeing to come on here and share her experience and her professional opinion. If you have struggled with eating disorders in the past, if you struggle with anxiety, if you've found a good result of switching to a low carb or a whole foods diet, please share it in the comments below. I promise you, people seeing other real people having real results is a game changer, like mentally for them. If they don't feel alone in this, if they feel like they've only heard like the big social media people say it's good, they're less likely to try it than if they heard their next door neighbor saying that it works. So I would encourage you to share your story, get out there, say something, help somebody, and be a kind person. And with that, thank you. Bye.
Bye.